G'day viewers, and welcome to another Jen and Phil in the Philippines. I've moved inside. Hopefully it's a little bit quieter and you can all hear me. As usual, subscribe, press the notification bell and buttons, share and comment. I always look forward to your comments. Now, the subject I chose today is a little bit of a dicey one. Not many vloggers actually talk about it. But let's see how we go. I'll review the tape and see if it's worthwhile putting on, and if you see it, well, you're obviously seeing it. But anyway, as I said, the subject of today is perceived corruption in Asian countries, or as I like to call it, favour compensation, and I'll get into that. The first thing I'd like to start with in relation to this very touchy subject is, one must admit, even doesn't matter where you're viewing this anywhere in the world, corruption of one type or another takes place all over the world, in every first world country, every emerging country, every third world country. And as long as human beings can find a shortcut or find it profitable to do so, it will continue to go on. I would suggest that corruption is probably as old as prostitution itself, which is considered to be, the oldest profession. Having said all that, this doesn't necessarily, I'm not talking necessarily about the Philippines, but now that we've come to the conclusion that corruption or favour compensation exists all over the world, and it's not just the subject of this particular place or anywhere else in Asia or Australia for that matter, or the United States or Canada, if we agree that that principle does exist, what I'm about to explain to you can be taken in the right context. Now, the first thing I'll say is the perception, and I'll say it's a perception, that most of Southeast Asian countries are corrupt in one form or another, is that it's a perception. And I'm not suggesting it doesn't go on in different facets of both government and civil service, and other forms. Even in private enterprise, a certain amount of corruption goes on. And we won't go into the definitions of corruption or favour compensation, which is probably a much nicer word. And the reason I use favour compensation rather than corruption in a lot of these instances is, if you enter into an agreement with whomever to get a result of any description that favours you, that person is to be compensated for the extra time that it takes to go above and beyond what is the normal practice. Okay, we're splitting hairs, but on the same token too, as with Western countries, as with all countries around the world, and Asia is no exception, it's not so much what you know, it's who you know that will give you a favourable outcome. And this, in Western countries, usually is representatives of the government that you have avenues of access to, and you obviously write your letters, and they will, because you're a constituent or a voter in that country, they go and they represent your particular claims. Well, I suppose the easiest way to state that corruption occurs in South America, in Southeast Asia and whatever, all stems back to accountability and a reporting process. If we all have an ability to report something, and the avenues are open to us, and we can see a result through that report, and it's in a time-sensitive period, a period of time that is reasonable, we obviously go through those channels to get any grievance settled, or to get an outcome which may or may not be favourable to your good selves. The unfortunate thing about Southeast Asia, South America, and places that we consider, and I say we consider, to be corrupt in its purest form, is that we are influenced by Hollywood. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but the thing about it is, on a day-to-day basis, the only contact we have with open corruption, or what we perceive to be open corruption, is usually reflected in nefarious motion pictures and television series, and they generalize, and they give you a method of which they believe, as script writers, that corruption takes place. And it can be as something as ridiculous, and don't get me wrong, it does happen, because they lead the way, they influence our points of views on places, especially if we haven't been there and done it personally. You know, that is a reflection on how things are done, and we get that reflection through Hollywood and through television and through dramas, and we all know that the majority of those are done for dramatic effect. The unfortunate thing is that it takes on the persona that that's the way you conduct business in a lot of these countries. Now, some of these techniques, and I'll outline just a simple technique of corruption that Westerners perceive to be the way to do business. There's the old thing about you're pulled over by the police in one of many countries, even through Europe and whatever, and the Baltics, and you may have done a minor infringement, and rather than go through the hassle of possibly a court appearance and whatever, half the time you don't even know what the situation would be had you just gone the normal route and services. So you're influenced by the misconception that if you slip in 100 baht with your license, or 100 pesos in either the Philippines or Mexico or whatever the currency happens to be, and you slip that across to the police officer in conjunction with your passport or your license, that somehow miraculously it'll be returned to you, you'll be waved on, missing the 100 or so or whatever denomination you've slipped. Now, this is a persona, a technique that has been promulgated by Hollywood and a lot of expats that have tried this type of thing, and some have succeeded. You don't often hear of when it doesn't succeed, and a lot of times it just doesn't succeed. And then you find yourself in more trouble by doing this ridiculous thing than you were by just copying it sweet and finding out what may be the fine, what may be 1,000,001 things. Now, we're not talking about something as dramatic as trying to escape from a country and you're at a border crossing and you bribe someone, for want of a better word, to get out of that country, which is portrayed again on television shows and whatever. Now, all this type of negative example is the only reflection you have on places. And I'm not saying it doesn't work in particular times, because this is a poor country. And Asia is a poor country, and South America is a poor country, and levels of corruption do occur. But I'm sure if you pick the right amount, and I'm sure it happens in the United States, where you'll slip someone to look the other X amount of dollars, But you do run the risk, if you miscalculate, that you will get an honest officer or an honest public servant. And by you just immediately assuming you can come into a foreign country as an interloper, as a guest, and insult them, this honest person, by suggesting that they take money for a favourable outcome, well, you can see the end result. You can get yourself into a monumental amount of trouble. So it's a practice that's not only illegal, it's dissuaded. So don't think you can come over here with a pocket full of money and go to Southeast Asian countries like Thailand and Vietnam and simply run amok in that particular country, do things you would never normally do in your own country because you have this sense of freedom and you're in a position of wealth compared to the general population. You probably have more money in your pocket than the guy you're talking to earns in a month. But rest assured, if you follow this technique, you are going to come across one of two people. Eventually, you're going to come across the honest official that believes it's insulting that you even could consider this type of thing, and they're going to take it further and what could be a little favour now turns into a monumental criminal case, and you'll go down that rabbit hole and you will not dig your way out of it. The second one is you're going to insult the person by not offering enough money. And even if they are an official that is open to corruption, do not come over with a smile on your face and attempt to believe that you know how much you should pay for this because someone's told you all you've got to do is do this and all you've got to do is do that, and you'll get away with blue murder. So human nature is human nature. You're going to get, and there is a lot of honest people in Southeast Asia holding government positions that work within the framework and whatever. So be totally aware. If you are going to pursue this type of activity, you run the risk of it becoming far worse than it ever should be. What's tempting about countries in Southeast Asia, especially from a Westerner's point of view, is how they structure their government bodies. It's very, in a lot of Southeast Asian countries, because you, one, don't know the language, two, you don't know the system, and three, it's very difficult to get information. And the system is convoluted and long, and you're unsure of it. We immediately assume with money you can fix everything. So, yes, Southeast Asia on the whole has a convoluted government and legal system, but it works 9 times out of 10. And yes, I'm not suggesting that if you were to pay compensation to a person in a position for him to look favourably on an outcome, that won't work either. But it's a very fine line you tread, and I dissuade you from doing it. The easiest way to steer away from this type of thing is to stay out of trouble, act like a reasonable human being, be patient, and before you put your foot in it, before you think you have no other alternative but to do this, find out for yourself what the normal procedures are, the normal legal procedures are to follow up a complaint or a mishap or a legal area that you may have involved yourselves in. If all else fails, there is always your consulates who will guide you through this process. Whether it be this country, whether it be other Southeast, whether it be South America. Use the facilities, it doesn't matter how long it takes, that are already there before you go down the illegal path of handing over money to people you don't know and who 9 times out of 10 have very limited ability to do what they boast they can do within the system. Remember this also, if you do this illegal path of bribery and corruption, you are opening yourself up to more than just a loss of funds. You're opening yourself up to blackmail. Most of the people that take part in this nefarious activity are of shady background. And once you start off this situation, it's highly unlikely that a singular payment towards your perceived outcome is going to be the first or the last. You are a cash cow in a lot of third world countries in South America and whatever, and you are desperate. So you open yourself up to blackmail, you open yourself up to the threat of legal ramifications, so do not do it. Seek assistance from people that can help you within the government. Go through the normal procedures. I'm not suggesting anything to anybody over there that if everything else fails, what you should do. You know, sometimes you've got to take your medicine. Sometimes you've got to accept the answer is no. You know, it's all very good to point your finger towards countries such as Mexico and Venezuela and whatever, and say quite easily, oh, that's a way of life. That's the way they do things down there. It may be. But wrong is wrong. And as soon as you enter into any form of legal activity, you open yourself up to a myriad of hideous outcomes. Unfortunately, a lot of these nefarious activities are perpetrated by unscrupulous lawyers. You expect from our own countries, who we have a certain amount of protection from this type of thing within our constitutional rights or within our legislation, to protect us against these nefarious peoples. You know, we assume that lawyers are held to the standards in other countries that our lawyers and our solicitors are held to. You know, unfortunately, this is not the case. Do not confuse a good bedside manner, a smile, and whatever, empathetic discussion, a sympathy, to be anything other than a sales technique to you. You know, we go back to doctors. A lot of people, even in the West, say, oh, he's a fabulous doctor, he's really good with me. You know, I would prefer, you know, in fact, I'm very skeptical about people that are too friendly and too helpful, because there's usually something in it for them. Doctors in particular. I would rather have a gruff, rather arrogant doctor with no bedside manner that is totally and utterly competent than a smiling fool that makes me feel nice, warm and fuzzy by being sweet and is incompetent. It's the end results that count. And it's the same as any system in this country, in Vietnam, in Thailand, in Cambodia, in Laos and Mexico, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, where you are seen as a source of revenue. So don't put yourselves in that position. Do not do it. You know, if you want to come to a country that has systems, if you want to, you eventually this type of thing has got to be stamped out, and you cannot cast aspersions on this country if you yourself are involved in this activity. As I said, the easiest way to get out of anything like this is to keep your nose clean in the first place. You know. Now, you can read between the lines as far as this vlog is concerned. We all know that certain corruption activities or compensation activities happen all over the world. But you enter into these agreements at your own peril. The easiest way, and I don't think too many people understand this, let's take a pure example. If an expat is held in jail and a solicitor comes to him and said it's going to be 2 years before you even get into court, and then the person turns around and says, isn't there something you can do? And then a nefarious lawyer says, well, I can talk to a judge and I can do this, but we've got to compensate him for his time. We're using nice language here, but we've got to, in effect, bribe him to do this and to do that. And it's going to cost you 100,000 of whatever currency it may be. Rest assured, 50% of that will be retained by, if you're lucky and it doesn't go into the lawyer's pocket, 50% or more will go into his pocket. Then he's got to convince someone else with only 25% or 50% of what you've given him to do something that's higher up the scale and higher up the hierarchy. And of course, if he's taking 75,000 or 50,000 of whatever currency, how do you expect a person on the next run to accept 50 or 25,000 pesos? And 9 times out of 10, this type of collusion requires yet another step up and another step up. And therefore, what occurs for you to continue this activity, the lawyer comes back to you and says, because he hasn't got enough money to influence the next run, and then the next run hasn't got enough money to influence the next run. This is why they keep coming back for money until you're either totally broke, your family's totally broke, or if by the very rare chance you do get through to a person that can help you, there is no guarantee that even with their assistance that you'll get a positive outcome. There are no guarantees in third world or emerging countries. So don't do it. If you get into any trouble, whether it be on a civil matter, or whether it be on a criminal matter, or whether it be a problem in general, the best place you can go, first off, is to your own consulates and ask. They are experts in the field in that country and they will advise you. Now, I don't know, because I've never been in trouble and required consulate assistance, what they will say in those meetings, but be guided by them. Well, that's my little 2 bobs worth. I hope you enjoyed it. Any questions you have, and as I said, I've got to say this because a lot of my Filipino friends out there that is watching may misunderstand the message I'm trying to put across to my expat or possible expat community in the Western world. I'm trying to dissuade them of doing this type of thing so they'll stay out of trouble, and we will not extend this practice into the future. It's something we can't stamp out in any country in the world. It will continue and continue. But unless we stop providing, and this goes for Filipinos as well, providing this level of compensation or corruption up the ladder, it will never be stamped out. Okay guys, as I said, subscribe if you found it interesting, love the comments, ring the bell, notifications, share it, and we'll go from there. Cheers for now.